Introduce the episode and we'll just dive right in if that works for you.
Sounds good.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you once again for joining me at Pastor's Positive Mental Health Institute. I'm Kirk, and if you like what you are hearing or seeing, please like, share, and subscribe. Also, together we get to build the church, build one another up in love so we can help the church flourish. Another wonderful guest. I met Stephen I guess it was 2 years ago at a South Idaho Pastors Conference, I think. But this is Reverend Dr. Stephen Mueller. That sounds very, very official. I'm going to call you Steve for the duration, if that's okay with you.
Perfect.
But a couple of things just to get started. I always like to ask, especially guests who are ordained pastors, what led you to be in the ministry?
So that's a rather complicated question in many ways, at least in its current form. So I grew up in a Christian family. I was part of the church my whole life. Both my grandparents were pastors, Lutheran pastors, and so I had a lot of family encouragement to follow in those footsteps, which probably didn't help things. It made me maybe slow down a little bit in my consideration, but through high school, I was involved in some summer camp work with the Lutheran camp, and that kind of sparked the interest for my own involvement. And then began kind of pursuing a career, thinking first I was going to do director of Christian education, youth ministry, family ministry kinds of things. And then in just process of studying for that, and then some of the experiences of it, discovered gifts that maybe lent themselves better toward the pastoral ministry. And so I finished that program, but then went straight to seminary to prepare to be a pastor. So a lot of people encouraging and praying along the way.
Yeah, and that's, you grew up in the church, you had some heritage of that, and people affirming that with you. It's one of those things where I've met pastors over the years, or people who want to be pastors, and have said, I think I want to be a pastor, and I'll say, well, tell me who else has kind of told you that or agreed that. Well, no one. I'm like, well, you might just want to ask some other people. But through that, though, I mean, you've got quite a history. So you've got a doctorate and something to do with C.S. Lewis. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. So I did my work on the Christology of C.S. Lewis. Oh. At the time, lots of people had looked at kind of surface level things about Lewis. Including, Aslan is like Jesus or mere Christianity. But at the time, no one had done a kind of comprehensive study of all of his works, see what it really fit and how it aligned theologically, doing that. And so that was my work. I went through absolutely everything to discover, the answers to that.
Yeah. Fascinating. I got to sit in some sessions as you talked about that. I learned more about C.S. Lewis than I ever thought I needed to know. So I'm sure you know a lot more too. We know that. So let's talk about a few things really quick just to get us started. So you're working officially. You're assistant pastor at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Irvine. Is that still correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And what is your official title or titles at Concordia Irvine?
So at Concordia, so I have two calls, and Concordia is my primary call. I serve as vice president and chief mission officer. There, I'm a member of the faculty as well, a theology professor. Okay. But my primary duties now as chief mission officer is attending to everything related to institutional identity and mission. So I oversee campus ministry and church relations, support a lot of different departments in the work that they're doing, and in making sure we're all pulling the same direction. And then I oversee human resources and interview all finalists for employment at the university about mission fit, because in the time that we're living in, the people that serve you are the ones that shape your ministry more than anything. And we've got about 400 employees on a regular basis, and they're the ones who carry it forward. So we know that everyone who comes in is now asked about their faith, their confession, how they live that out, how they bring that into the workplace, and do they support the distinctive theological things that make Concordia what it is.
Well, that's good. So I might veer a little bit just because I'm interested, and I think our listeners might be interested in. So we know that there's a current shortage in the LCMS for pastors. A lot of pulpits that are open. We know that if we look at the future, it doesn't look It looks like we're going to need more pastors. With if you look at the average age of the LCMS pastor right now, and a lot of them actually think I would retire if they thought they could retire, and so there's some challenges there. And so you have a unique program at Concordia Irvine that is shaping and forming pastors called Cross Cultural Ministry. What's the C? A center, I guess, is the
Center,
C
yes.
there. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about when that started, how that's going, what you're seeing as far as pastoral formation through that program.
Sure. So it's a program that's a joint effort of Concordia Irvine and Concordia Seminary St. Louis, and it's really important that people remember that second part because sometimes they think we're doing things off on our own. This has been a partnership with Concordia Seminary for all these years, and the way it's structured is they get their academic degree from us and they study primarily on our campus. But they're theological certifications, so they're admitted to the program and then certified for ministry by Concordia Seminary.
Okay.
And we have professors from both institutions that are teaching. Students now spend time on both campuses, so it's very much a unified program in doing it. So we've been doing that for since 1995.
Really?
Been operating that program.
Wow.
It started off primarily for non-Anglo pastors, in the Western region, who we were discovering would, their church would identify a leader, would send them, to the traditional seminaries, and they would spend, 4 years in Missouri or Indiana and wherever their vicarage was, and they'd come back, and their immigrant community would not recognize them, and that's not to fault the seminaries, but it was that they'd spend enough time out of their community that there was a disconnect. And so we began this contextual program with Concordia Seminary, specifically so we could leave people embedded, in their ministries, and then prepare them for culture crossing work, going along. And in the years since, lots of things have changed, including, the ability to do distance education. And things like that. And so our range has expanded from a relatively small area to a broader section of the country, largely in the Western U.S. And we have typically around 25 people going through this program at a time, and all of them are embedded in a ministry. All of them are preparing to do culture crossing ministry, reaching someone that the church hasn't done a good job reaching before. So it's not a program to say, I'd really like to be the assistant pastor of my church and I don't want to change anything. And, there's other programs for things like that.
Yeah.
So this is designed for someone who's really going to get the gospel, push us into other areas, faithful, it's structured on the MDiv curriculum. So it's that same kind of rigor, 4 years of academics, master's level. But they're in that same congregation the whole time. And our ideal for it, what we're trying to get all the students to do is to launch a new culture crossing ministry while they're doing that. So it might be a new congregation, it might be a new service or a new outreach within an existing congregation, but something that gets us beyond the kind of business as usual, and tries to get our churches to more be like the communities where they're placed. To better serve.
Oh, that's good. Great program. And I think we've seen some success out of that from what I can tell. And, some of the wins, I think, from that is that fact that currently we see a lot of them, they're kind of placed as a vicar fairly quickly, and they spend several years in that rather than going to SEM for a few years, going to be a vicar for a year, and then going back, right? And so it seems to be like there's a little more of a connection to practical ministry potentially because of that. And so, and again, having them embedded in their communities and trying to reach a certain maybe unchurched demographic, I think is very, very valuable. So you serve as an assistant, is it assistant pastor? Is that your official title at the other call?
It is, yes.
Okay. So tell me kind of what your role is there and what you do.
So it's a relatively small role now. I had served, for most of my time here at Concordia, I've served churches in a variety of roles as pastoral assistant or things like that. I'm when we joined this congregation, they immediately put me to work because that's what churches do to free pastors. They say, can you back up? And after a while, they said, this is just regular. Would you consider, being called here to be a more regular, part of our ministry? And so I had a bigger role in the past. As my duties at Concordia morphed into my current role, I've got more travel and things like that associated. So I really had to pull back on things in the parish. But so right now, my primary responsibility is I preach once a month, and then once during Advent and Lent, as we're going along, and then of course help out in any other way I can.
Were you at any time sole pastor of a church, or?
I was never sole pastor. I served in team ministry everywhere I've been, and had some wonderful ministries along the way.
Well, so over the years then, and this really crosses over a little bit. I mean, there's a little different dynamic when you deal with a paycheck, and you're dealing with employees, even though you are in a Christian context there at Concordia. But how have you over the years relied on church members in your roles in the church, and even to support what you're doing at Concordia? Obviously, there's some help there.
Sure. Well, none of it would be possible without them. And especially at Concordia, we're a ministry of the church. We're the church's school. We belong to the congregations. We're serving people from our congregations, and we very much value and prize that relationship. And so, how do we rely on our church members? Number one, prayer. We would not be where we are without the prayers of the faithful that are just constantly lifting us up. And that's both for the university and it's for me personally. And the ups and downs that are kind of the reality of ministry, to know that there's people that have your back, and people that you can reach out to when you need to, but more importantly, the people that I know are praying without being asked. And every once in a while, it's easy to forget about them, but every once in a while, someone will just say something just offhanded. As though I was praying for you this week, and what a blessing that is to know that one of God's people values your work and is holding you up and supporting you in our weaknesses, to know that there's people like that behind us. The encouragement of knowing that there's people there. Frankly, it's one of the really interesting things of having calls in two different places, is that they almost balance each other out a little bit. I remember a few years ago we were going through a bit more challenging time at the university, and I remember showing up at a Sunday I was on duty at my congregation, and just the joy of being in that context. That was something different, and just a completely different kind of ministry, and people who were just smiled. To be candid, and this last Sunday, do you remember the congregation saw me coming in and talked to me and just said flat out, says, "You weren't here last week. We missed you." And what a precious thing, to receive, how that builds us up. So I would say that kind of prayer and encouragement is a big one. And then I always hesitate to bring it up, but we are a ministry of the church, and it takes a lot to carry off a ministry like this, serving thousands of people and resourcing churches and doing individual students. And so frankly, it's the gifts of the faithful that have let us do this. It's the people who invested and had that vision to say, we need this kind of ministry. We're going to back you and help you acquire land and buildings and give scholarships and things like that. Even those small gifts really make a difference. And I get to see the end result. I mean, I'm with these students and seeing lives that get really transformed, watching people come in and grow in confidence and go off in service. It's a really, really neat blessing. And to know there's thousands of people that stand behind that.
Yeah. No, I think that's, it's wonderful. Pastors and those church workers. I mean, we love knowing that people are praying for us. I mean, that's one of across the board, I think pastors would say that's the number one thing that we need. But sometimes people are like, well, but that seems just insignificant. What else can I do? And so then we have the practical side. Well, you can give money. I mean And it's not that we are needing, God provides everything, but God uses human means to provide, and even in a supernatural way. Because,
Mhm.
sometimes you get these gifts, you're like, where did that come from? And that wasn't something that you asked for, but somebody responded to the work of the Holy Spirit in their life, and they said, this is a valuable thing. And that means a lot to you at the school, also you at the church, when people are supporting that financially. And so I don't want to ever diminish that. That's just a practical need of the ministry and a part of the ministry that indicates the health of. Not always, but it is sometimes an indication of whether or not the ministry is healthy or not. So,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah,
Don't ever underestimate. And I'm blessed. I'm in a stable position, and been secure in a place for a long time. But don't underestimate how big an impact that can have on a minister.
yeah,
Is that even just the smallest helping hand or word of encouragement can fuel people for weeks.
yeah, yeah. And asking the pastor, especially in those rural areas, I mean, all areas, but, is there anything else you need, or can I bless you, with something, and just really and pastors, tell them. Tell them
Yeah.
that you need something. It's okay. So tell me about a time, if I know you've had some rough times at the school. Obviously COVID was challenging, and you're in a building project right now. When has there been a time, though, that you've been maybe a little bit discouraged in the ministry and you felt built up?
Boy, there's so many different times. Um, COVID gives a really good example, of it. So, we had during that probably the busiest season of my life,
Hmm.
that almost instantaneous pivot from serving, 1,500 people on campus, about 5,000 students total, to basically over a weekend, everything's online, having to completely reinvent the way we do business. In state of California, the state was had lots of conflicting statutes and rules, and everything was made for other kinds of institutions, but we were liable for all of it. And it was really brutal. And as part of that, we had to let some people go. We had to change things, and it was just really tough. And letting the people go is the hardest part, because then it's not just about how it impacts the school, but you're impacting individual lives.
Yeah.
And that's the burden that you carry with decisions like that, of knowing even when it's necessary, this is incredibly hard. And a lot of people break under that kind of pressure. What kept me going in there, the tools that God used to keep me going, were a bunch of people working together. And we I think it transformed the university a lot during that period. There was actually two groups of people. One group that focused on academics, and they got their act together and figured it out pretty quickly, and pretty much disbanded, and they carried on their work. And then there was a group that was concerned with kind of day-to-day operations. And so we had facilities, and we had health center, and we had student services, and I was there for ministerial support and things like that. And so this big cross section of people, and together that team really kind of invented the ways through it that we used, and they became the tool that helped all of us make it.
Yeah.
And just that riding the wave of frustration, and one group's about to go crazy, and three others come around and say, you got this, and just that the cheerleaders that were behind you going along, and then people to give perspective, including things like, we're going to do the best we can,
Right.
and not everything, we're going to make some bad decisions in doing this, we're going to deal with the information that we have at hand, and we're going to act in good faith, and then we're going to be gracious to each other if it turns out we could have made a different decision. And so it really built up team in a powerful way.
Yeah. And that's important. I mean, the challenge a lot of times that the pastors have is they find themselves, whether intentionally or unintentionally, alone.
Yeah.
And so to really try to say, hey, how can I, because I mean, the reality is, and I have this type of personality, and God's working with me on it, is sometimes it's easier for me just to do it.
Of course.
And so, and yet we can find great joy in allowing other people to be part of the process and being with them, and they might do it actually sometimes better. It might take longer, but they might do it better than me, and so, but the joy of building that relationship and building one another up, and having that opportunity, to walk together for the purpose of glorifying the Lord together is really, really valuable. And I don't know if it's recorded somewhere, but I think it was 2021 best practices where some people from your team shared a lot of how that and what they did. And it was really,
Yep.
for me, it was really inspiring, just to see, because I mean, everybody experienced this, and in California and your institution even more. You're told one thing in the morning, and by the afternoon, it's now different.
Yep.
And so everyone's, you make plans, but you're like, this might not be the right plan in 5 hours. So, but that's good that you have people, and that's part of the church. That's why God gave us the church. I mean, even in your context, at the college, it's still a family. It's still like you said, it's under the umbrella of the church. It's a ministry of the church, and so that's really good. Any more comments on that?
Well, and one of the hard things when you talked about other people being able to do it too, sometimes the people that are there to do it are going to do a worse job than you,
Hmm.
and sometimes that's okay.
Right.
Because maybe the point isn't always to do it get the absolute best thing that can be done if it ends up destroying a person.
Right.
It might be better that something is done at 90% and that it saves the person who is going to burn out
Right.
by doing too many things.
Yeah. And I think
And
you talked about perspective too. I mean, that's an eternal perspective. Is this whatever that needs to get done? Is it really that important that it has to be done exactly a certain way, or can we have some grace here and think about the long picture? So you've been a
and
ministry.
remembering priorities, right? I mean, there's certain things we're never going to cut corners.
Yeah, right.
There was no chance we were going to stop the ministry of the gospel.
Hmm.
Not the slightest chance at all.
Right.
We had to modify it, but that was non-negotiable.
Yeah. Yeah.
How we got people fed, oh, we can negotiate. We're gonna feed them.
Hmm.
How it happens, all bets are off. We'll figure this out.
Figure it out, and we're gonna do some things wrong, and not gonna have the right equipment at times, and
Yep.
and then I don't know. Just on a side note, how many people did we have to try to walk through? And I'm going to pick on an elderly demographic for a minute, but during COVID, I don't know how to get the sound up. I don't know how to get, you're trying to stream and getting these texts as we're streaming in an empty church. And I can't, that was some interesting times then. But hey, it catapulted most churches to actually have an online presence that maybe didn't before. So I feel like the gospel's getting out more than it probably has because of that. So what the enemy intended for evil, God used for good. I think that's in scripture somewhere, right? No.
Somewhere it says that. Yes.
So over the years, so you've been in ministry quite a while. I'm not going to call you out on your age, but what has been, in your estimation, one of the most difficult or challenging aspects of ministry?
All right. I don't want to sound snarky. People.
That's about what 75% of people say. So you're good.
Yeah.
Good
No,
company.
it's the very thing that's the joy of ministry
Mm.
is being able to serve and bless people is also at times the greatest blessing and the greatest cross. Yeah. And I think in one of I've gone through this, I've helped other people through this a little bit. When my kids were little, they're all grown now. When my kids were little, they could be the sweetest kids and everything, and they come home and they're brutal to their parents.
Mm.
And you go, what the heck is going on here? Like, well, there's some stress that they're feeling, and the only safe place to let loose is on someone who's going to love them no matter what.
Yeah.
And so moms especially will often have to deal with a lot of drama and things that they didn't do anything, they don't deserve any of it, and yet the kid is kind of venting and unloading, and it's hard to take that step back and say, gee, I know what's happening, it's not about me at all. It's like that. Well, I think people in ministry are in that same dynamic, that we're the people who have to take it.
Yeah.
we're there to be sacrificial. We're there to be Christ-like. We're there to bless them no matter what. And you know what? Yeah, I am going to take it.
Mm.
Um, and it's very easy for church members to lose track of even why they're doing something, or why, and how much pain they can inflict on another person. And objectively, I can know, and you, with some passing time, you can reflect on that and say, oh, I know what was going on. And so I was helping someone going through this, just a couple of weeks ago, and relaying a pretty tough situation to me. And I can, armchair psychologist, I can pretty much diagnose the person that's causing this problem. I mean, it's really pretty crystal clear what's going on here. That has nothing to do with the church worker he was attacking. He's externalizing, but he was still doing it.
Yeah.
And the person who was suffering from it was this faithful church worker, who needed to get away just long enough to catch the breath and say, okay, it's not me. Mm-hmm. It's not me. And by the way, we all should have the courage of asking, is it me? Right? It's, but in this case, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was unjust, and that is how sometimes when you're doing the right thing, we're in a broken world.
Yeah.
And we've inflicted our share of that kind of pain on other people. But I think that's the hardest. It's the flock that you're trying to serve can inflict some pretty serious wounds.
Yeah, sheep eat sheep, or something like that. Something that says we eat our own sheep. That's the phrase. Anyway, but the challenge is, here's the thing, and this is kind of what maybe you can speak to this too. So we're in the people business. I mean, that's what we do. We work with people, and we work we tread in the most intimate place of their lives.
Absolutely.
And that's their belief system and their identity in Christ. And so, we're poking the bear a lot of times, or we're speaking into that area. So you have people being the struggle, and which is part of the profession, the vocation that we're in. But also, you also need people to help meet those challenges. So can you kind of tell me how maybe sometimes there's been those challenges with other people where other church members have kind of helped?
Oh, they almost always help.
Okay.
Even when they don't know what's going on, right? I think, when people do know, and this is the stuff that's almost always under the radar that people don't know is happening. And I've had it happen. I've seen it happen, and to other people a number of times, where someone will come up and it's almost always quiet and behind the scenes, and then say something like, "We know, we saw what happened. Yeah. We know what it is. Yeah. We know it's not you." Just that word of encouragement goes a long way. And it's different personalities are going to respond to it differently. But if someone's taken flack from someone who's got something going on in their lives, they're externalizing it, they're attacking. It's easy to let that overwhelm the positive voices, and then that's one of the temptations for ministers, that we hear all that criticism, and then we deflect all the good, right? So if you've preached a wonderful sermon, what do you say if someone compliments you on it? Well, yes, it was rather fine, wasn't it? No, of course not. Isn't God's word wonderful?
Yeah.
Isn't it great that God speaks through? We deflect the compliment, and we take all the criticism.
Yeah.
And not to, we don't want to be big-headed about it, but we've got a lot of people who will come up and are really expressing appreciation. And I think some of it is learning that maturity to recognize the goodness of the situation, even when it's not said. It might be, if I'm really struggling with someone, and thankfully that's not common, but if I'm really struggling with someone, to take that moment back and say, and yet that person came to church this week, and alongside them were all these other people, and they don't always give me the positive feedback of what I'm saying, except for the fact that they are there and they're supportive and they're showing up and they're saying good morning and they're thankful, and every bit of that I ought to be taking as feedback that God's at work here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because I've got all this indirect evidence
Mm.
of, God's doing something and he's using me as one of the ways that he's doing that. And then the frosting on top is you get those dear people who are then just reaching out at the right moment and saying, thank you, or, hey, I made a pie. I'm trying to get this across to people. I made a pie, Pastor. I thought you'd like a piece of pie today. That hasn't happened recently. But
is there a specific pie that they so, well, you comment on something really important, and I kind of want to just highlight this before we kind of get some closing thoughts here, is that one of the things that I try to encourage pastors and church workers to do is they have to pause and reflect to see all the actual good things that are happening. Because again, my emphasis of study is how the actions of church members influence the positive mental health of a pastor.
Yep.
Well, sometimes you have to pause and go, what actions are happening? They're sitting there. They're supportive. They're smiling during the sermon. They're not falling asleep. They're actually saying thank you and good morning. I mean, these are simple things that we have to take the time and realize that the 95 to 98% of the people who walk in the church week in and week out, those are positive interactions.
Yes, they are.
But those 2% or the 1% that just consumes us. And a lot of it is, and I've said this, and people will be no surprise, a lot of it is because pastors are pretty insecure. We are at the core, whether we admit it or not, people pleasers, and we want everyone to like us. And then ultimately what we do is sacred work, and we want to see people flourish in their walk with the Lord. And when it's not happening, we take it extremely personally. Yeah. And so one of the things I try to get church members to understand is that everything we do is personal to us. We can't just go to work and punch in and punch out, do some programs or whatever we do and then go home. It's something that we see it as extremely eternal. And so we take great care in that. So, so last couple things. First of all, so official title is Vice President, Chief Mission Officer. Is that correct?
Yep.
Ooh, big stuff. But really, a lot of what you do is a pastoral capacity. I mean, human resources, you got to be pastoral in, right? for creating culture and protecting the culture at the school. And so also, if you could just take a moment, and I'm not asking you to brag too much, but there's many other talents to Steve Mueller here. He's a musician, written some hymns. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That people might find if they go to CPH, right?
So Lutheran Service Book, Christ the Word of God Incarnate.
Yep.
One of them.
Also, you've authored a few books.
Yep.
And you've been involved in some other theological books. Is this correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So share with us what you've worked on and what you contributed to.
Sure. Some of the big ones: Not a Tame God, Christ in the Writings of C.S. Lewis. Mm-hmm. I was the lead author and then editor of Called to Believe, Teach, and Confess, which is a book on Christian doctrine that we use at a lot of the Concordias and a little bit at both seminaries as we go along. So that's been really gratifying to see how God's used that. To some other ends, I was one of the associate editors on the Lutheran Study Bible, one that people see. So, God gave me the ability to write, and it's meant, our gifts are meant to serve. Mm-hmm. And so it's not about me. It's just a way of extending the ministry.
So you can find his work very easily, but I'll give you this hint. Stephen P. Mueller, that usually comes up with him as the author if you want to check that out. Yep. So two final questions. It's the same question, but I want to kind of hear two different contexts. So what is the desire for, number one, the people at Concordia, the students that you have there and the staff that you have there? What would be your ultimate desire for them? And then the same question, but in the church context for the people at the church.
Sure. So students and staff, they're I think related, but those two are already different a little bit. So for students, we want to see them flourish, grow into their potential as both scholars, but especially as children of God. We want them while they're here to encounter the gospel. We want them to develop meaningful relationships and to see their life as a calling from God, as various vocations in which God's going to use them in service, and they're going to be blessed. And if we've done that, then life is good. For our staff, I want them to see their own positions as that they're, whatever their role, God has called them to be part of this work. And one of my crusades, I'm trying to get everybody on the university, when I ask, what do you do at Concordia? The first thing I want them to do is to talk about the students. I help form these students. We often use the phrase here, wise, honorable, cultivated citizens. I develop these wise, honorable, cultivated citizens by doing this. At graduation day, I want them to be proud and to say, whatever their role was, I'm part of this. And when a student comes back, an alumnus has a wonderful accomplishment or a victory, everybody working, I want them to celebrate that because we all had a part in that.
Yeah.
And to share that mission together that's bringing the gospel. That's above all, that's what I want. For members of the church, I want them to know Jesus. Know Jesus and walk with him, and really that's the one that crosses over, right? To live lives of discipleship that are nourished and sustained by the God who loves us so much. That we grow deeper in his word, that we're strong in the fellowship of his church, that we're the body here and leading forward.
Well, that's good. Steve, thank you so much. Continued blessings upon the work that you do for the kingdom. And again, I encourage anybody who is listening or watching this, check out his work. He's a good writer. You won't be disappointed. And again, as he says, it's the gift that God has given him, and he is being a good steward of that gift, and it's being used and available for you. And again, if you like what you're hearing, please like, subscribe, and share. Check out Concordia University Irvine. There, maybe God's calling you to go to school, and maybe he's calling you to be a director of Christian education, or maybe you're in a context of cross-cultural ministry where, like, here's a people group that hasn't been reached, and I think God's asking me to do that. Please reach out and get that started. Dr. Mueller here will help you with that, and he's got a lot of great staff that are very responsive, and so I encourage you to do that. But as we work together, we're building one another up in love and helping the church flourish. Thanks again, Steve.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.